A warm welcome from Swadharma Academy. This week, we're diving into a world that's changing so fast it's hard to keep up. We're talking about technology, society, global power. The fundamental things we thought were solid are kind of shifting right under our feet. And that really gets to the big question we're asking in this explainer. Are we watching a brand new future being born, or are we just seeing the old one fall apart? The stories we're about to get into, well, they aren't just random events. Think of them as clues, all pointing to a much bigger transformation happening across the globe. All right, first up, let's jump into a huge leap in technology, something that could completely change everything we know about energy. I mean, we are literally talking about bottling a star. Yup, we're talking about nuclear fusion. As you can see here, it's the exact same process that powers our sun. You take two light atoms, smash them together to make a heavier one, and boom, you release a massive amount of clean energy. And this is where the promise of fusion really starts to shine. You see, it's totally different from the nuclear fission power we have today, which splits heavy atoms and leaves behind all that nasty radioactive waste. Fusion, well, it's just cleaner, it's safer, and get this, its main fuel source comes from water, so it's practically limitless. And hey, this isn't science fiction anymore. Scientists in China just had a major breakthrough. They were able to keep the super hot plasma needed for fusion stable at densities 65% higher than what everyone thought was the absolute maximum limit. That is a massive technical hurdle to clear. So the takeaway here is just huge. This isn't just some small step. It's a giant leap closer to a future with abundant, safe, and totally carbon-free energy. We're getting closer and closer to a world powered by tiny, man-made stars. How cool is that? Okay, let's switch gears for our next shift. This one takes us out of this science lab and into the really complex world of human relationships and the laws that are supposed to protect the most vulnerable people in our society. So, in India, there is a law called the Protection of Children from Sexual Offences Act, or POCSO for short. It was designed to be this powerful shield. Its purpose is crystal clear: protect kids from sexual abuse with a complete zero-tolerance approach. Absolutely vital. But here's where things get complicated. The way the law is being applied, very strictly, is starting a huge national conversation. Why? Because it's catching cases of teenage romance in its net, situations where both people are minors and the relationship is consensual. And this visual really lays out the dilemma perfectly. On one side, you have the absolute necessity of protecting children from predators, but on the other, you have this unintended consequence of criminalizing young people who are in a relationship, potentially ruining their entire futures. It's a tough one. And we're not just talking about a few isolated incidents here. A UNICEF analysis found that between 2016 and 2020, a staggering 25%, 1 in 4, of the PSO cases in several Indian states weren't about exploitation at all. They were about consensual romantic relationships, often reported by families who just didn't approve. Because of all this, India's Supreme Court has actually asked the government to think about adding a Romeo and Juliet clause. This would give judges the power to tell the difference between predatory abuse and teenage romance. It really shows a huge societal shift in how we think about law, consent, and growing up. All right, for our final shift, let's look at something happening on the global stage, where the line between money and war is getting really, really blurry, creating a whole new kind of battlefield. The World Economic Forum is calling this geo-economic confrontation, and they say it's one of the biggest risks we face. Basically, this is when countries start using economic policies as weapons, things like sanctions, tariffs, currency games, not just for financial reasons, but to achieve political and military goals. And if you want to see just how destructive this can be, we need to look at the recent turmoil in Iran. This wasn't a conflict that started with soldiers or bombs. No, it started with shopkeepers in the marketplace. This number, it's just almost impossible to wrap your head around. Since 1979, Iran's currency has devalued by a factor of 20,000. Think about that. This total collapse, made worse by harsh international sanctions, has absolutely crippled the economy and the daily lives of regular people, making even basic things impossible to afford. And this timeline just shows the tragic direct result. Protests that started over the price of goods quickly spiraled into a huge nationwide movement, and the state's response was brutal. You can see over 2,000 people were killed in less than a month. It's a terrifying example of how economic pressure from the outside can trigger a complete collapse and horrible bloodshed on the inside. So, a fusion reactor in China, a legal debate in India, and deadly protests in Iran. What on earth do these things have in common? Well, they all show us a world that's trying to deal with massive, fundamental change. Each one of these stories, whether it's a scientific breakthrough or a societal breakdown, is really telling the same underlying story. We are living through a period of major realignment. We're searching for new rules, new sources of power, and, new ways to organize ourselves as a society. And so that kind of leaves all of us with one final big question to think about. As the old ways of doing things start to crumble and all these new possibilities are opening up, what foundations are we going to choose to build on? What's going to define the new reality we're all stepping into together?